You've felt this before. You just didn't have the words for it. That strange moment when you look up at the night sky and something inside you whispers that the distance isn't as real as it seems. That maybe the stars aren't as far away as you've been told. That maybe far and near are just ideas you've been taught to trust without ever really questioning them. And here's the part that unsettles you, even if you've never said it out loud. If distance in space isn't what you think it is, then what else about your reality is built on assumptions you never chose? You've always believed space is this vast emptiness, endless, silent, stretching out in every direction. You imagine yourself as small, separated, isolated inside it. But what if that feeling of separation isn't coming from space at all? What if it's coming from the way your mind was taught to see it? And more importantly, what if that same illusion is shaping how you experience your life, your relationships, even your sense of self? Because once you begin to see through the illusion of distance, you don't just understand space differently, you understand yourself differently. And that's where this begins. You were taught to measure everything: distance in kilometers, time in seconds, relationships in closeness, emotions in intensity. You learned early on that things exist over there or right here, that some things are within reach and others are far beyond you. It feels obvious, natural, undeniable. But pause for a moment. When you say something is far away, what are you actually describing? Are you describing reality, or are you describing your experience of it? Because those two aren't always the same. And this is where something quietly profound begins to unfold. The idea that distance is real feels so solid because your brain depends on it. It organizes your world. It keeps things predictable. It tells you what matters now and what can wait. It creates a map so you don't feel lost, but maps are not the territory. They are interpretations, simplifications, useful illusions. And in physics, especially in the kind of thinking that someone like Richard Feynman explored, distance isn't as fixed as it seems. What you call distance is deeply tied to how you observe things, how you measure them, and even how you exist within the system itself. In other words, distance is not just out there. It's something you participate in, and that realization is subtle. But once it lands, it starts to shift everything. Think about this. You see a star in the night sky. You're told it's millions of light years away. Your mind tries to grasp that, but it can't really feel it, so it settles for an abstract understanding. Far, but what you're actually seeing is light, arriving, right now. Not in the past, not far away. Here, in your eyes, in your awareness. The star in that moment is not distant in your experience. It is present, immediate, direct. The distance only exists in the story you tell about it. And this is where something deeper starts to echo inside you. Because isn't that how you experience so much of your life? You feel disconnected from people. You feel like something you want is far away. You feel like happiness is somewhere in the future, or that a better version of you exists somewhere else. But those feelings, they're built on the same structure, a mental map, a sense of distance that feels real, but is constructed. You've been taught to think of life as a journey across space and time, moving from point A to point B, getting closer to what you want, getting further from what you fear. But what if that's not how it actually works? What if the sense of getting closer or being far away is more about how you perceive things than where they actually are? This is where it gets uncomfortable. Because if distance is not absolute, then neither is separation. And if separation isn't absolute, then the feeling of being alone might not be as solid as it feels. That doesn't mean your emotions aren't real. They are. But the story behind them, the interpretation, might not be as fixed as you think. You've probably had moments where someone feels emotionally distant, even when they're sitting right next to you. And other times, someone feels deeply close to you, even when they're miles away. So what does distance really mean in those moments? It's not physical, it's psychological, it's relational. It's something your mind constructs based on attention, connection, and meaning. And now, take that same idea and expand it outward, into the universe itself. What if space is not just a backdrop where things exist, but a relationship between things? What if distance is not a fixed property, but something that emerges from how things interact? This is not just philosophy, it's something modern physics hints at again and again. The idea that reality is not made of separate objects sitting in empty space, but of relationships, interactions, and connections. And suddenly, the universe doesn't feel like a cold, distant place anymore. It feels intimate. But here's the part that challenges you. If distance is an illusion, then the way you experience your own life might also be shaped by similar illusions. Think about how often you say, "I'm not there yet. That's too far for me. I'll get there someday." You're creating psychological distance. You're placing parts of your life, your goals, your identity, somewhere else. Somewhere not here. And in doing that, you reinforce a feeling of separation. But what if the thing you're chasing isn't far away? What if it's just not recognized right now? This doesn't mean everything magically appears. It means your relationship to it changes, because distance, at its core, is about perception. And perception is something that can shift. You've already experienced this. Think about a moment when time seemed to slow down, or when hours passed in what felt like minutes. Time stretched or collapsed based on your state of mind. Distance works in a similar way. When you're emotionally overwhelmed, everything feels far, difficult, out of reach. When you're clear and focused, things feel closer, simpler, possible. So what changed? Not reality, your perception of it. And this is where something powerful begins to emerge. If your mind can stretch and compress time, if it can create feelings of closeness and distance, then it is not just observing reality, it is shaping your experience of it. And that means you are not as separate from your reality as you've been led to believe. You're participating in it, constantly. Now pause here for a second, because this can go in two directions. One direction is discomfort. If distance is an illusion, then the boundaries you rely on, the sense of me versus everything else, starts to blur, and that can feel unsettling. But the other direction is freedom. Because if distance is not fixed, then neither are the limits you've placed on yourself. The idea that something is too far, too difficult, or not for you, starts to lose its grip. Not because reality changes overnight, but because your relationship to it does. And that changes how you move, how you act, how you decide. You stop waiting for things to come closer, and you start realizing that the sense of distance was part of the illusion all along. Now, this doesn't mean ignoring reality or pretending everything is easy. It means seeing more clearly. And clarity changes everything, because when you see that distance is not absolute, you stop defining yourself by where you think you are. You stop saying, "I'm behind," or "I'm far from where I should be." Those ideas begin to feel less solid, less true, and something else takes their place. Presence. You start noticing what's actually here, what's actually available, what's actually real in your experience. And that's where things begin to shift in a way that feels subtle, but deeply powerful. Because most of your stress doesn't come from what is happening right now. It comes from the distance you imagine between where you are and where you think you need to be. Remove that imagined distance, or at least question it. And suddenly, the weight changes. You're still moving, still growing, still evolving. But you're not carrying the same psychological burden. You're not constantly measuring yourself against an invisible horizon. And this is where the deeper connection to Feynman's way of thinking quietly emerges. He had this ability to look at things not as fixed truths, but as questions, to peel back assumptions, to ask, what do we really mean by this? And when you do that with something as basic as distance, you realize how much of your understanding is built on layers of interpretation. Useful, yes, but not absolute. And once you see that, you can't fully unsee it. You begin to notice it everywhere. In how you think about success, in how you think about relationships, in how you think about yourself. You start catching those moments where your mind says, "That's far away." And instead of accepting it immediately, you pause. You ask, "Is it really? Or is that just how it feels right now?" And that small question creates space Not physical space, psychological space. The kind that gives you room to breathe, to reconsider, to see differently. And that's where something quietly transformative begins. Because the biggest limitations in your life are rarely physical, they're perceptual. They come from how you interpret distance, time, and possibility. Change the interpretation, and the experience begins to change with it. Not instantly, not magically, but steadily, naturally. Like your mind is learning a new way to see. And the more you see this, the more something else becomes clear. You were never as separate as you thought. Not from the universe, not from others, not even from the version of yourself you've been trying to reach. Because distance, in the deepest sense, was never as real as it felt. And that realization doesn't take anything away from you. It gives something back. A sense of connection, a sense of immediacy, a sense that maybe, just maybe, you are already closer than you think. So the next time you look up at the night sky, or the next time you feel like something in your life is too far away, pause. Just for a moment. And notice what is actually here, what is actually present, what is actually real in your experience. Because the illusion of distance is powerful, but so is your ability to see through it. And once you begin to see, you don't just understand the universe differently, you understand yourself differently. And that changes everything in ways you won't fully grasp all at once, but you'll feel it, quietly, subtly, like something inside you is no longer reaching as far, because it has started to realize it was never that far to begin with.